My mother's voice crackled over the phone speaker, competing with the roar of 60,000 screaming fans. "You are being dramatic again, Maya. Do not call us back until the encore is over. You are ruining the vibe for your sister." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my trembling hand, lying on a hospital gurney while a nurse prepped me for emergency surgery. My parents had just chosen a Taylor Swift concert over my life and the safety of my 5-year-old twins. As the anesthesia began to pull me under, I did not feel fear anymore. I felt a cold, hard clarity. That night, from my recovery bed, I transferred $5,000 to a stranger to watch my children. Then I called my lawyer. 2 weeks later, my parents came knocking on my door expecting their monthly allowance. They had no idea the locks had been changed. Before I tell you how I dismantled my family's entire financial existence, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the one who gives everything, only to be treated like you are nothing. My name is Maya, and at 34 years old, I thought I had built a fortress around my life. As the chief financial officer of a major logistics firm in Atlanta, I spent my days managing risk, predicting disasters, and ensuring stability. I was the rock. I was the one people leaned on. But as I sat in my home office that Tuesday afternoon, leading a high-stakes Zoom meeting about quarterly projections, I had no idea that my own foundation was about to crumble. The pain didn't start gradually. It hit me like a sniper shot. 1 second, I was explaining a spreadsheet to the board of directors. The next, a white-hot spike of agony tore through my lower right abdomen. It was so intense, so sudden that I gasped aloud, dropping my stylus. My vision blurred. The faces on my monitor dissolved into pixels as the room spun violently. I tried to stand, to apologize, to say I needed a moment, but my legs refused to cooperate. I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, knocking over a heavy ceramic vase. The crash was loud enough to bring them running. Leo and Luna, my 5-year-old twins, burst into the office. They should have been playing with their blocks in the living room. Instead, they froze in the doorway, their eyes wide with terror. "Mommy," Leo whispered, his voice trembling. I wanted to comfort them. I wanted to use my soothing mom voice and tell them it was just a tummy ache. But I couldn't breathe. Every shallow inhale felt like swallowing broken glass. I curled into a fetal position, clutching my side. Luna started to cry, a high-pitched, terrified sound that broke my heart more than the physical pain. "Get the phone," I wheezed, pointing a shaking finger at my desk. Leo, bless his brave little heart, scrambled up onto my chair and grabbed my smartphone. He brought it to me, his small hands shaking as much as mine. I barely managed to unlock it with Face ID before my vision grayed out again. I tapped the emergency button. The next 10 minutes were a blur of agony and fear. I remember the paramedics bursting through the front door. I remember the look on the lead EMT's face when he palpated my abdomen. His expression went from professional to urgent in a heartbeat. "Rigid abdomen. Possible rupture. We need to move now," he shouted to his partner. They were strapping me onto the gurney when reality crashed into me harder than the pain. My children. I was a widow. My husband Marcus had passed away 3 years ago in a car accident. It was just me. There was nobody else in the house. "Ma'am, who is taking the children?" the EMT asked, pausing with his hand on the gurney rail. "We cannot take minors in the ambulance unless there is absolutely no other option, and even then social services will have to meet us at the hospital." Panic colder than this pain flooded my veins. Social services, foster care, strangers taking Leo and Luna? No, absolutely not. My phone, I gasped, clutching the device like a lifeline. "I will call my mother. She is close. She will come." I truly believed it. Despite our differences, despite the fact that I was always the scapegoat and my younger sister Bianca was the golden child. This was an emergency. This was life or death. Surely my mother Patricia would drop everything. The ambulance ride was a nightmare of sirens and potholes. The paramedic held the phone for me as I dialed Mom's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I prayed she wasn't driving. I prayed she would pick up. Hello? Her voice was distant, drowned out by a wall of background noise. Drums, bass, thousands of people screaming. Mom! I choked out, tears streaming down my face. Mom, it is Maya. I am in an ambulance. My appendix. They think it ruptured. What I cannot hear you. The opener is just finishing, she shouted back. She sounded annoyed, not concerned. Mom, please listen, I screamed, the effort tearing at my insides. I am being taken to St. Jude's Hospital. I need you to go to my house. The kids, Leo and Luna, are there with a neighbor I flagged down, but she cannot stay. You need to get them. There was a pause. The noise on her end swelled. I heard my sister Bianca's voice in the background, laughing and yelling something about a friendship bracelet. Maya, are you serious right now? Mom's voice came back sharp and cold. We are at the stadium, the Eras Tour. Do you have any idea how much your father paid for these VIP tickets? We have been planning this for months. Bianca is finally happy. I felt like I had been slapped. Mom, I am going into surgery. Emergency surgery. I could die. The kids have nobody. Don't be so dramatic, my father Vernon suddenly came on the line. He must have grabbed the phone. I heard the sneer in his voice. You always do this, Maya. Always making everything about you. Your appendix isn't going anywhere. It is probably just gas. It is not gas, I sobbed, the pain becoming unbearable. Dad, please. The EMTs are saying social services will take the twins if nobody claims them. Well, that is poor planning on your part, isn't it? Dad snapped. Look, we are already in our seats. We are not leaving. Bianca would be crushed. Call an Uber. Call a babysitter. Stop trying to guilt trip us. Just because you are jealous, we are out having fun. Jealous, I was dying. Dad, please, I begged, my dignity shattering. I will pay you. I will pay for the tickets. Just go get the kids. The line crackled. Then I heard my mother again. We are turning off the phone, Maya. Stop calling. Handle your own mess for once. You are a nuisance and a burden. The call ended. The silence that followed was louder than the siren wailing overhead. The EMT looked down at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and horror. He had heard everything. I lay there, the rejection burning hotter than the infection in my gut. A nuisance. A burden. I was the one who paid off their mortgage. I was the one who bought Bianca her first car. I was the one who funded their lifestyle. And yet when I was bleeding out, I was a burden. We are 5 minutes out, the driver shouted from the front. I needed to act. I wiped the tears from my cheeks with a shaking hand. I could break down later. Right now, I had to be the CFO. I had to manage the crisis. I opened my browser and navigated to the website of the Elite Nanny Agency. It was a service for high-net-worth executives providing emergency-vetted childcare. It was outrageously expensive, usually reserved for celebrities, but I didn't care. I dialed their emergency hotline. A woman with a calm British accent answered immediately. This is an emergency request, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I need a trauma-informed nanny at my residence immediately. 2 children age 5. I am being admitted for surgery. I need coverage for at least 48 hours. Certainly, madam, the woman said. For immediate dispatch within the hour, there is a premium surcharge. The total deposit required is $5,000. Do it, I said. I am authorizing the charge on my black card now. Send someone who is kind. Please, just send someone kind. Transaction approved. A wave of relief washed over me, followed immediately by a tsunami of darkness. I had solved the problem. My children would be safe with a stranger because my own flesh and blood chose a pop star over their survival. The ambulance doors flew open. Bright hospital lights flooded my vision. As the medical team swarmed around me, cutting my blouse and inserting IVs, I felt a strange detachment. The physical pain was there, yes, but something else had broken inside me. A cord had been severed. They wheeled me into the operating room. The anesthesiologist placed a mask over my face. "Count backwards from 10, Maya," he said gently. 10. I thought of my father's voice calling me selfish. 9. I thought of my mother saying I was ruining the vibe. 8. I saw the picture they had posted on Facebook earlier that day, smiling, holding up their expensive tickets. Tickets I had paid for. 7. I closed my eyes, and in that darkness I made a vow. If I woke up from this surgery, the Maya they knew, the doormat, the bank account, the dutiful daughter, was dead. She died right here on this table. 6. The person who would wake up was someone they had never met before, and God help them when she did. Waking up from anesthesia is not like in the movies. There is no sudden gasp for air, no dramatic realization of where you are. It is a slow, muddy crawl out of a deep black well. My eyelids felt like they were weighted down with lead, and my throat was so dry it felt like I had swallowed sand. The first thing I registered was the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor, a steady mechanical pulse that confirmed I was still alive. The second thing I registered was the silence. I turned my head to the side, fighting the wave of nausea that rolled through me. I expected to see someone. Anyone. In my haze, a small, foolish part of my brain still believed that my parents would be there. I imagined my mother Patricia sitting in the visitor's chair looking worried, maybe holding a cup of bad hospital coffee. I imagined my father Vernon pacing near the window, grumbling about the parking fees, but present nonetheless. I even imagined my sister Bianca, perhaps guilt-ridden enough to skip the after-party. But the chair was empty. The vinyl cushion was smooth and unwrinkled. The bedside table was bare. No flowers, no get-well-soon balloons, no notes scribbled on napkins. Just a plastic pitcher of lukewarm water and my cell phone sitting face down like a black monolith. I was alone in a sterile white box, while the people who shared my DNA were celebrating a pop concert 30 miles away. The surgery had taken 4 hours, followed by 2 hours in recovery. 6 hours had passed and nobody had come. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling with weakness. There were no missed calls, no text messages asking if I had survived. The only notification on my lock screen was from the bank confirming the massive transfer I had made to the elite nanny agency before I went under. I pressed the video call button for the agency contact. My heart hammered against my ribs until the screen lit up. A face appeared, filling the frame with warmth and authority. It was Mrs. Higgins. She was an older black woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and judged most of it unworthy of worry. She was wearing a sensible cardigan, and behind her I could see my kitchen, Mrs. Higgins. I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. The children. She smiled, and it was the first kind thing I had seen all day. She turned the camera around. There at my kitchen table sat Leo and Luna. They were in their pajamas, their faces clean, eating what looked like homemade macaroni and cheese. Real food. Not the frozen nuggets I usually resorted to after a 12-hour workday. Mrs. Higgins had cooked. Mommy, Leo shouted, waving a fork. Mrs. Higgins made the cheesy pasta with the crunch on top. "Are you okay?" Mommy Luna asked, her big eyes searching the small screen. "I am okay, baby," I lied, forcing a smile that pulled at my stitches. The doctors fixed my tummy. "I just need to sleep for a while." Mrs. Higgins turned the camera back to herself. Her gaze was sharp but gentle, piercing through the digital connection. "You rest, Miss Maya. These babies are fine. We read 3 books, brushed teeth, and now we are having a late-night treat before bed. I have raised 4 of my own and 6 grandbabies. I know how to hold down a fort. You just heal. Do not worry about a thing in this house." I thanked her, my voice breaking, and ended the call. I sank back into the pillows, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. A stranger, a woman I was paying by the hour, was giving my children more love and stability in one night than my own mother had given them in 5 years. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the bitterness. It tasted like bile in the back of my throat. I should have put the phone down. I should have slept. But pain keeps you awake, and betrayal makes you masochistic. I opened Instagram. My thumb hovered over the icon, knowing it was a mistake, but I tapped it anyway. The first thing that popped up was Bianca's story. It had been posted 2 hours ago. The video was shaky, flashing with strobe lights. Bianca was screaming, her face glittered and flushed with excitement. She was wearing a custom sequined jacket that I knew cost more than my car insurance deductible. She panned the camera to my mother, who was holding a $20 cocktail and singing along, looking younger and happier than she ever looked when she visited my house. The caption across the screen read, "Best night of my life." Taylor looked right at me. Hashtag family goals. Hashtag blessed. I swiped. The next story was a photo of the four of them. My mom, dad, Bianca, and her husband Kyle. They were huddled together for a selfie, beaming under the stadium lights. They looked like the perfect, tight-knit family. The caption said, "Nothing matters more than these people." I felt a physical blow to my chest. I was lying in a hospital bed with organs cut open, and they were performing happiness for the internet. Then I saw Kyle's post. My brother-in-law. The man who had not held a steady job in 3 years. The man whose car payments I secretly covered to keep Bianca from being embarrassed. He had posted a picture of a champagne bottle in the VIP lounge. His caption was short, but it was a precision strike. He wrote, "Finally some good vibes. Hate when negative people try to ruin the energy with their drama. Cheers to living life stress-free. Negative people. Drama." That was me. My ruptured appendix, my near-death experience was just drama to them. I was the dark cloud raining on their parade. I threw the phone onto the blanket, my hands shaking so hard I thought I might rip out my IV. The anger that flared up in me was not the hot, explosive kind. It was cold. It was the kind of cold that burns. The door opened and a doctor walked in. He looked tired. "Miss Brooks, I am Dr. Evans. We have a bit of a situation." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "The rupture was more severe than we initially thought," he said, checking my chart. "There is significant inflammation, and we are seeing signs of a post-operative infection. Your white blood count is spiking. We cannot discharge you tomorrow as planned. I need to keep you here for at least another 3 days for intravenous antibiotics to prevent sepsis." 3 days. 3 more days of isolation. 3 more days of billing Mrs. Higgins at premium rates. But I nodded. I didn't have a choice. As soon as the doctor left, I picked up the phone again. I needed to tell them. Not because I wanted their sympathy anymore, but because I needed to see how low they would go. I needed to know exactly where the bottom was. I dialed my mother. It was nearly 1 in the morning, but I knew they would be up. They were adrenaline junkies. She answered on the second ring, her voice raspy from screaming at the concert. "Hello, Mom, it is me," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Maya." "Jesus. Do you know what time it is?" "We just got back to the hotel. My feet are killing me. I am still in the hospital, Mom. There are complications. I have an infection. I have to stay for 3 more days." There was a heavy sigh on the other end. A sigh of inconvenience. "Well, what do you want me to do about it? I am not a doctor." "I just thought you should know," I said. "And I wanted to check if you could maybe stop by tomorrow, since you are in the city anyway." "Tomorrow is no good," she said immediately. "We have brunch reservations at Le Monde, and then Bianca and I booked a full day at the spa. We need to decompress." The concert was amazing, but it was exhausting, Maya. You have no idea how draining it is to stand for 3 hours. "You are going to a spa," I repeated, staring at the sterile ceiling tiles. "Yes, and actually, since you are on the phone, I meant to ask you something. The card you gave me, the one for the pharmacy expenses. It got declined at the hotel bar tonight." It was so embarrassing. The bartender looked at me like I was a criminal. "You need to transfer the monthly allowance early." The spa is expensive and I want to treat Bianca. She has been so stressed lately with her online brand. The room spun. I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. I was lying in a hospital bed risking sepsis, paying a stranger to hold my children, and my mother was asking for money to treat my able-bodied sister to a massage because she was stressed. I did not scream. I did not cry. The Maya who would have begged for love was gone. "Transfer the money, Maya," my mother demanded, her tone sharpening when I didn't answer. "We have a 10 o'clock appointment. Don't be petty just because you are sick." "I am not being petty, Mom," I said softly. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It sounded like steel. "Good," she said, missing the shift entirely. "Just handle it by morning. I need my beauty sleep." She hung up. I lowered the phone and looked at the black screen. The silence in the room wasn't oppressive anymore. It was clarifying. It gave me space to think, to plan, to calculate. I opened my banking app. I looked at the balance. I looked at the history of transfers to Vernon and Patricia Brooks. I looked at the auto payments set up for Bianca's rent. Dr. Evans said I had 3 days. 3 days of sitting in this bed with nothing but my laptop and my phone. 3 days to review every single receipt, every single transaction, every single lie. I pulled up the contact for the bank's fraud department. I didn't call them yet. I wanted to wait until morning. I wanted to wait until 10 o'clock. Right when they would be walking up to the reception desk at the spa, wrapped in their plush white robes, expecting my money to smooth their way. I put the phone down and closed my eyes. For the first time all day I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a CFO who just found a massive discrepancy in the ledger and knows exactly who is going to pay for it. "Rest well, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "You are going to need it." The silence of a hospital room at 3 in the morning is heavy. It gives you too much time to think, too much time to replay the reels of your life that you usually keep locked away in the back of your mind. As I lay there staring at the blinking green light of the heart monitor, my mind drifted back 5 years. I remembered the day I found my father Vernon weeping at the kitchen table. He had made a series of bad investments and leveraged the family home to cover the losses. The foreclosure notice was sitting right there on the placemat next to his cold coffee. He was a proud man, a man who defined himself by his ability to provide, and he was terrified of the shame. He was terrified of the neighbors finding out. So I did what I always did. I fixed it. I used my entire signing bonus from the logistics firm, plus my personal savings, to buy the house outright. I paid off the bank. I saved his reputation. And to protect his fragile ego, I made a verbal agreement that we would never speak of it. To the outside world, it was still Vernon and Patricia's house. I paid the property taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance, but I let him keep his name on the mailbox. I let him play the role of the patriarch while I quietly footed the bill. I thought I was being a good daughter. I thought I was honoring my family. Now, lying in a hospital bed with an incision in my abdomen, that memory felt less like an act of love and more like the first brick in the wall of my own prison. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. Sleep was impossible and the pain medication had worn off just enough to leave me restless. I decided to do a routine check of my finances. It was a habit, a way to regain a sense of control when my body felt helpless. I opened my banking app and logged in with my fingerprint. The balances looked normal at first glance. My savings were intact. The checking account had the dip from the nanny agency payment. But then I clicked on the credit card tab, specifically the supplementary card ending in 4092. This was the card I had given to my mother 3 years ago. It came with a strict set of rules. It was for emergencies only. Specifically, it was to cover the co-payments for my father's heart medication and any urgent household repairs that couldn't wait until I transferred the monthly allowance. I trusted her. I trusted them. I tapped on the transaction history, and my breath hitched in my throat. The screen filled with a list of charges that had absolutely nothing to do with heart medication. Ticketmaster, $6,000. The date was yesterday. The exact same morning I had called them from the ambulance. While I was writhing in pain on the floor of my office, my mother was using my card to buy VIP packages for the Eras tour. I scrolled down, my fingers shaking against the glass screen. Le Monde French Bistro, $840. The timestamp was 7:30 in the evening. At that exact moment, I was being wheeled out of the recovery room, shivering from the anesthesia, begging a nurse for a blanket. My family was eating filet mignon and drinking vintage wine paid for by me. Stadium Merchandise Store, $215. They had bought souvenirs. They had bought t-shirts to commemorate the night they left me to die. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. It wasn't just that they didn't care. It was worse. I had funded my own abandonment. I had paid for the very distraction that kept them from saving my children. I was the architect of my own misery. I had handed them the weapon, and they had pulled the trigger without a second thought. I looked at the total balance due. Over $7,000 in less than 12 hours. $7,000 of my hard-earned money spent on joy and celebration while I was terrified and alone. A normal person might have thrown the phone. A normal person might have called their mother right then and there, screaming until their voice gave out. But I was not feeling normal. I was feeling a deadly, icy calm. The kind of calm that comes before a hurricane destroys a coastline. I did not dial my mother. I did not dial my father. I closed the banking app and opened my contacts. I scrolled past family members, past friends, until I found the name I was looking for. Mr. Henderson, attorney at law. It was 4 in the morning, but I knew his office had a 24-hour answering service for high-profile clients. I pressed the call button. When the operator answered, my voice didn't shake. I didn't sound like a victim. I sounded like the chief financial officer who had just discovered embezzlement in the company accounts. "I need to leave a message for Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice crisp and clear in the quiet room. "Tell him it is urgent. Tell him Maya Brooks is ready to execute the nuclear option on the property deed, and tell him to draft a cease and desist letter. I am done being the bank." I hung up the phone and placed it gently back on the table. I stared at the ceiling, dry-eyed. The tears were gone. They were expensive, and my family could no longer afford them. The drive home from the hospital was quiet. Mrs. Higgins drove my SUV with the careful precision of someone carrying precious cargo, checking the rearview mirror every few minutes to make sure I was comfortable. When we pulled into the driveway, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, an instinctive bracing for chaos. But when I opened the front door, I was met with the smell of roast chicken and lavender. The house was spotless. The toys were organized. Leo and Luna came running towards me, stopping just inches from my legs when Mrs. Higgins gently reminded them about Mommy's tummy. They hugged my knees, burying their faces in my sweatpants. I stroked their hair, breathing in their scent, and realized this was the first time in 5 years I had come home from a crisis to a sanctuary instead of a storm. But the silence from my phone was deafening. I had been discharged, and my parents did not know. My sister did not know. They had not asked. I settled into my bedroom, propped up by pillows Mrs. Higgins had arranged. My body was exhausted, but my mind was racing with the adrenaline of betrayal. I opened my laptop. I had already seen the credit card theft, but I knew that was just the tip of the iceberg. If I was going to cut them off, I needed to know exactly what I was cutting. I needed to perform a forensic audit on my own family. I started with Kyle, my brother-in-law, the self-proclaimed tech entrepreneur. For 3 years, I had been listening to his pitches about revolutionary apps and blockchain logistics. He always needed capital. He always needed bridge loans. I had signed as a guarantor on their luxury apartment lease because he claimed his assets were tied up in venture capital rounds. Because I was the guarantor, I had legal access to the payment history and the credit checks used for the renewal last month. I pulled up his file. The first thing I noticed was the credit score. It was in the low 500s. That was impossible for someone running a successful startup. I dug deeper into the linked bank statements he had submitted to the leasing office. There were no deposits from investors. There were no transfers from clients. The only incoming money was from two sources: my sister Bianca, which meant my money, and occasional small transfers from a joint account. Then I looked at the outgoing money. It was a laundry list of vice. DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM. Thousands of dollars a month poured into online sports betting. The rest was spent on luxury goods: Gucci loafers, a vintage Rolex watch service, high-end steakhouses. Kyle was not a struggling entrepreneur. He was an unemployed gambler wearing a costume of success, and I was paying for the ticket. I felt a surge of nausea that had nothing to do with my surgery. He had called me selfish. He had called me negative. All while wearing shoes bought with the money I worked 80-hour weeks to earn. I closed his tab and opened a new one. It was time to check on Bianca. My sister was the golden child, the fragile artist who was getting her master's degree in art history. I paid her tuition directly, or so I thought. I transferred $15,000 every semester to her personal account because she claimed the university portal was too confusing and she wanted to manage the payments herself to build credit. I navigated to the university registrar's website. I had her student ID number from the initial enrollment paperwork 3 years ago. I logged into the parent and payer portal. The screen flashed red. Student status inactive. I frowned. Maybe it was a system error. I called the registrar's office, putting the phone on speaker while I rubbed my temples. "Hello, this is the registrar," a cheerful voice answered. "Hi, my name is Maya Brooks. I am calling to verify the enrollment status of my sister Bianca Brooks. I handle her tuition payments. One moment, please." I heard the clicking of a keyboard. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. "Ms. Brooks, are you still there?" "Yes, I am looking at Bianca's record. She is not currently enrolled. Her last active semester was 18 months ago. She withdrew with a failing grade point average and has not attempted to re-register." 18 months. I thanked the woman and hung up. The room seemed to tilt. For a year and a half, Bianca had been pretending to go to class. She had been forging her grade reports. She had been taking $30,000 a year from me for tuition, plus another $2,000 a month for living expenses, and she wasn't even in school. Where was she going during the day? Probably the mall. Probably the spa. Probably lying in bed scrolling through TikTok while I was in board meetings, missing my children's milestones. I opened a blank Excel spreadsheet. It was the only way I knew how to process the magnitude of the lie. I started typing. Tuition for 3 fake semesters, $45,000. Rent for the apartment I subsidized, $60,000 over 2 years. Monthly allowance for my parents, $48,000. Emergency handouts for Kyle's fake business, $12,000. The credit card theft from yesterday, $7,000. I summed the column. The cursor blinked. $172,000. In just 2 years, my family had drained nearly $200,000 from me. That was a college fund for Leo and Luna. That was the down payment on a vacation home I had always dreamed of but told myself I couldn't afford. That was my blood, sweat, and time stolen by the people who were supposed to love me. I stared at the number until it burned into my retinas. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't their daughter or their sister anymore. I was an ATM that had just run out of cash. I saved the file as Brooks Family Audit. Then I opened my email and drafted a message to my banker. Subject: stop payment immediate. Body: please cancel all standing orders and recurring transfers to the following accounts immediately. Freeze the supplementary credit cards ending in 4092 and 5518. Reject any pending drafts. I hit send. Then I closed the laptop. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across my bedroom floor. Downstairs, I could hear Mrs. Higgins laughing with my children. That was real. That was honest. What I had with my parents and sister was a transaction, and the contract had just expired. I laid back against the pillows and closed my eyes. I knew what was coming next. When the money stopped, the monsters would come out. They would be angry. They would be vicious. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. They thought they were manipulating the soft, eager to please Maya. They didn't know that Maya had died on the operating table, and the woman who woke up had a calculator in one hand and a match in the other. Let them come, I was ready. The first of the month was usually the day I felt the heaviest weight on my shoulders. For years, it was the day I sat down with my coffee and performed the ritual of distribution. $4,000 to my parents for their mortgage on the house I already owned. 2,500 for Bianca's rent. Another 1,000 for miscellaneous credit card bills that miraculously appeared under my name. It was a day of financial hemorrhaging that I had convinced myself was duty. But today, the 1st of November, the sun was shining through the French doors of my living room, and I felt lighter than air. I sat on my patio with a cup of chamomile tea prepared by Mrs. Higgins, my laptop open in front of me. I did not open the transfer portal. Instead, I opened the security settings. One by one, I changed the passwords. The Netflix account my parents used all day. The Amazon Prime account Bianca used to order clothes she never wore. The shared Uber Eats login. Then I went to the credit card dashboard. With a few simple clicks, I reported the supplementary cards lost or stolen and requested a freeze on all new authorizations. The digital lifeline that had sustained my family's delusions of grandeur for half a decade was severed in less than 5 minutes. I took a sip of tea and waited. The silence lasted until exactly 11 in the morning. That was usually when my mother woke up and attempted her first purchase of the day. My phone, which I had placed face down on the glass table, began to vibrate. It did not stop. It buzzed and danced across the surface like an angry hornet. I watched it with a detached curiosity. 10 missed calls. 15. 20. The screen lit up with the name Mom followed by a string of desperate emojis. Then came the texts from Bianca. They arrived in a machine gun staccato. Maya. Maya, pick up. My Uber is stuck. Payment declined. This is embarrassing. Are you dead? Pick up the phone, I let it ring. I watched the notifications pile up like leaves in a storm. Then a voicemail notification popped up. It was from my father. I pressed play, turning the volume up so I could hear his voice over the chirping of the birds in my garden. Maya, what the hell is going on? His voice boomed thick with rage and humiliation. I am at the clubhouse with the partners from the firm. I just tried to pay for a round of drinks and the card was declined. Declined. Maya. The bartender cut the card in half right in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how much of a fool I look? Fix this immediately. I do not care if you are in the hospital or on the moon. Call the bank now. The entitlement in his voice made my stomach turn, but it also solidified my resolve. He wasn't worried that his daughter's finances were in trouble. He was worried about looking poor in front of his golf buddies. The phone rang again. It was my mother. This time I picked up. Hello, Mom, I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a stranger. You little witch, she shrieked. I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Do you know what you have done? Bianca is stranded at the mall. My card isn't working at the salon. Why did you cancel the transfers? We have bills due today. Maya. I took a slow breath. I am sorry, Mom, but I am not working right now. What? What do you mean you are not working? I am on medical leave, I said, testing the waters. I told you. The surgery had complications. I almost died. I am not earning my full salary while I am recovering, so I cannot send any money. There was a pause on the other end. For a second, a naive part of me hoped she would ask how I was feeling. I hoped she would say, "Oh my God, Maya, are you okay? Do you have enough for food?" You are lying, she spat out. You are the CFO. You have disability insurance. You have savings. Do not lie to me, Maya. I know how much you make. You are just doing this to punish us because we went to the concert. I am not punishing anyone. I said, my hand tightening on the armrest of my chair. I am just prioritizing my survival. My hospital bills are going to be astronomical. I have to pay for a nanny because my family was too busy to help me. I simply do not have the liquidity to support 3 households anymore. You selfish brat, she screamed. Bianca has a premiere tonight, a red carpet event for that influencer circle she is trying to break into. She needs a dress. She found the perfect one and it is $2,000. You need to unlock that card right now. This is her career. Maya, you are ruining her future. Her career, I repeated flatly. Mom, Bianca is not in school. I know she dropped out. I know about the fake grades. I know about the gambling debts Kyle has racked up. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Who told you that she whispered, her voice dangerous? It does not matter, I said. What matters is that the scholarship is over. The Bank of Maya is closed, permanently. You cannot do this, she hissed. We are your family. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. And I have paid for that roof 10 times over, I cut in. Good luck with the dress, Mom. Tell Bianca she can try getting a job. I hear the mall is hiring. I hung up before she could respond. My heart was pounding not from fear, but from the rush of adrenaline that comes with finally standing up to a bully. I blocked her number. Then I blocked my father. Then I blocked Bianca. I looked up to see Mrs. Higgins standing in the doorway of the patio. She was holding a tray of fresh fruit and her expression was unreadable. She had heard everything. I am sorry you had to hear that, Mrs. Higgins, I said, feeling a flush of shame creeping up my neck. Mrs. Higgins set the tray down on the table. She looked me dead in the eye, and her face softened into a smile of genuine respect. Honey, do not apologize. I have seen cleaner breakups on reality TV. You did good. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Mrs. Higgins, I have a proposition for you. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, my medical leave is going to end. Eventually, I said. And when I go back to work, I cannot have this chaos in my life. I need someone here. Not just for the children, but for the house. I need someone who can manage the staff, handle the groceries, and most importantly, someone who knows how to keep the gate locked when unwelcome visitors come knocking. Mrs. Higgins crossed her arms, looking thoughtful. You want a house manager? I want a gatekeeper, I corrected. I will double your agency rate. Full benefits. Paid vacation. But the primary job description is ensuring that my parents and my sister never step foot inside this house again unless I invite them. Can you handle that? Mrs. Higgins looked at the blocked phone on the table, then back at me. She picked up a slice of melon and took a bite, savoring it slowly. Miss Maya, she said, her eyes twinkling. I once stopped a 200-pound man from entering a wedding he wasn't invited to with nothing but a look and a clipboard. Your parents do not stand a chance. When do I start? Right now, I said, feeling the first genuine smile of the month spreading across my face. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Higgins. The real one. The drive to the Gables retirement estate was the first time I had breathed easy in days. While my phone was still silently exploding with blocked notifications from my enraged mother and sister, the winding road lined with ancient oak trees offered a temporary sanctuary. The Gables was not a nursing home. It was a luxury residence for the elderly elite, a place where retired judges and captains of industry spent their twilights playing bridge and drinking expensive scotch. And the only reason my grandfather Otis Brooks lived there was because he paid for every dime of it himself. At 82 years old, Grandpa Otis was a legend in our family, though lately my parents treated him more like a liability. He was a Korean War veteran who had returned home to segregated America and built a construction empire from a single pickup truck and a bag of hammers. He was the source of the generational wealth my parents liked to pretend they had earned. In recent years, however, he had become quieter. He walked slower. He often asked people to repeat themselves. My father Vernon had gleefully told me that the old man was losing his marbles, that senility was setting in. Because of this, my parents rarely visited him unless they needed a signature on a birthday check. I was the only one who came every Sunday, not for money, but to listen to his stories about building the skyline of Chicago. I parked my car and walked through the marble lobby. When I reached his suite, the door was unlocked. I pushed it open to find him sitting in his leather armchair, staring out the window at the manicured gardens. A jazz record was spinning softly on the turntable. He didn't look up as I entered. "Grandpa," I said softly, "it is Maya." He turned slowly. His eyes, usually sharp as flint, looked tired. "Maya. Is it Sunday already? I must have lost track of the days." My heart broke a little. The rumors were true. He was fading. I walked over and knelt beside his chair, taking his calloused hand in mine. It wasn't Sunday. It was Wednesday. But I needed to see him. I did not intend to cry. I really didn't. I wanted to be the strong, capable granddaughter he was proud of. But as soon as his warm hand covered mine, the dam broke. The trauma of the surgery, the terror of the ambulance ride, the cruelty of the Taylor Swift concert, the financial rape I had uncovered over the last 48 hours, it all came pouring out. I buried my face in his knee and sobbed. I sobbed like a little girl who had scraped her knee, except the wound was in my soul. I told him everything. I told him about the surgery. I told him about Mom and Dad refusing to leave the concert. I told him about the nanny agency. I told him about the $172,000 they had stolen from me. And finally, I told him about cutting them off. "I am sorry, Grandpa." I choked out, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "I know family means everything to you. I know you wanted us to stick together. But I cannot do it anymore. I cut the money. I am evicting them. I probably disappointed you. But I had to save myself." I waited for him to scold me. I waited for him to tell me to be patient, to forgive them, to honor my father and mother. Instead, the hand on my shoulder tightened. The grip was strong, iron strong. "Pass me my cane, Maya." The voice was not frail. It was not confused. It was the deep, commanding baritone of the man who had commanded construction crews for 40 years. I looked up, startled. Grandpa Otis was looking down at me, and the fog in his eyes was completely gone. In its place was a burning, lucid intelligence that sent a shiver down my spine. "Grandpa, get the cane, girl, and pour me a bourbon. Neat." I scrambled to obey. I handed him his walnut cane and poured a glass from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. He took a sip, savored it, and then looked me dead in the eye. "It took you long enough," he said. I stared at him. "What, I have been waiting 3 years for you to wake up," he said, gesturing for me to sit on the ottoman opposite him. "Did you really think I was senile, Maya? Did you really think I did not know what was happening to my own bloodline? But Dad said—" "Your father—" Otis spat the word out with disgust. "Your father is a peacock who thinks he is an eagle. He comes here once a month, sits in that chair, and lies to my face. He told me he bought that house in the suburbs with his investment dividends. He told me he was helping you pay your bills because you were struggling at work." My jaw dropped. "He told you he was helping me?" Otis nodded grimly. "And your sister. She comes here in her designer clothes, flashing fake report cards telling me she is top of her class. She thinks because I ask her to speak up that I am deaf. I am not deaf, Maya. I just like to make liars repeat their lies so I can remember them better." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I knew they were bleeding you dry. I knew you bought that house. I knew you were paying for Bianca's imaginary education. Then why didn't you stop them?" I asked, a flush of hurt rising in my chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't have listened," he said gently. "You were too busy trying to buy their love. If I had stepped in, you would have defended them. You would have made excuses. You had to see their true faces for yourself. You had to be the one to cut the cord. And now that you have—" He reached into the side pocket of his armchair and pulled out a small brass key. He tossed it to me. Open the bottom drawer of the desk. I walked over to the mahogany desk and unlocked the drawer. Inside, there was a single thick manila folder. It looked old, but well preserved. Bring it here. I handed him the folder. He placed it on his lap like a weapon. This, he said, tapping the cover, is the nuclear option. Inside this folder is the original deed to the land your parents' house sits on. Did you know I gave Vernon the down payment for that land 20 years ago? But I kept my name on the title as a silent lien holder, just in case he did something stupid. He forgot about it. But I didn't. He opened the folder, revealing a stack of legal documents. And this, he continued, is my will. The current one leaves everything to Vernon with the expectation that he cares for the family. But I drafted a new one 6 months ago. I just haven't signed it yet. I was waiting for a sign that there was someone worthy left in this family to lead it. He looked at me, pride shining in his eyes for the first time in years. You stood up, Maya. You protected those twins. You cut off the parasites. You are the matriarch now. He handed me the folder. What do we do? I asked, holding the documents as if they were fragile glass. We do not just evict them, Otis said, a mischievous, ruthless grin spreading across his face. We destroy their fantasy in front of an audience. They love appearances, don't they? They love looking rich and successful. Well, let's give them a show. He leaned back, swirling his bourbon. Next Sunday is my 83rd birthday. Usually I tell them not to bother. But this year, I want a party. A big one. I want you to host it at your house. Tell them I am making a special announcement about my estate. Tell them I am finally releasing their inheritance. They will think you are dying, I said, realizing the brilliance of the plan. They will think you are cashing them out. Exactly. Otis chuckled darkly. They will come running. They will bring their best fake smiles. They will bring that husband of Bianca's who thinks he is a hustler. And when they are all sitting there counting their chickens, I am going to roast them alive. I looked at the old man, my grandfather, and saw a warrior. The sadness that had weighed me down since the surgery evaporated. I wasn't an orphan anymore. I had an ally, and not just any ally, but the man who built the foundation we were all standing on. I stood up and wiped the last tear from my cheek. I will call Mrs. Higgins, I said, my voice steady. We have a party to plan. Make sure there is plenty of champagne, Otis added, winking. I want them to be toasting to their own demise when the hammer drops. I walked out of the Gables that afternoon with the yellow folder tucked into my purse and a fire in my belly. My parents thought they were dealing with a wounded daughter. They had no idea they had just awakened a dormant dynasty. The alliance was formed, the trap was set, and the payout was going to be legendary. The peace lasted exactly 48 hours. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was sitting in the living room with Mrs. Higgins going over the menu for the upcoming birthday party. For the first time since the surgery, the house felt like a sanctuary. The sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow on the hardwood floors, and the air smelled of lemon polish and fresh basil. I had forgotten that I hadn't changed the gate code yet. It was an oversight, a slip of the mind caused by pain medication and exhaustion. And that slip cost me my tranquility. The front door did not open. It exploded inward. There was no knock, no doorbell, just the heavy thud of the oak door hitting the stopper and the chaotic noise of my family invading my space. My father, Vernon, led the charge, marching in with the entitlement of a king entering his castle. My mother, Patricia, followed, fanning herself with a designer clutch, and trailing behind them were Bianca and Kyle. They moved as a unit, a wall of noise and accusation that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Mrs. Higgins immediately stood up, placing herself between me and the door, her posture shifting from kindly grandmother to bouncer in a split second. "Who are you people?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. "You cannot just barge in here." My mother waved a hand at her dismissively, not even making eye contact. "Get out of the way, help! We are family. We are here to see my daughter." I signaled Mrs. Higgins to stand down. "It is okay," I said, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Let them in. I want to hear what they have to say. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't look at the bandages visible under my loose shirt. They didn't ask where the twins were. My father walked straight to the leather recliner, my favorite chair, and sat down with a heavy grunt, putting his feet up on the coffee table. My mother walked past me into the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator door open. God, Maya, do you have anything to drink besides this green sludge? She called out, holding up a bottle of kale juice. Where is the Pinot Grigio? And why is it so cold in here? Turn up the heat. I watched them, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching a nature documentary about invasive species. They were so comfortable in their disrespect. Kyle was the one who approached me. He pulled a dining chair close to the sofa where I was sitting, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale cigar smoke. He leaned in, putting on a face of exaggerated concern that made my skin crawl. Maya, listened to me. He began, his voice soft and patronizing. We are not mad at you. We are worried. Seriously, Bianca has been crying all night. I looked at Bianca. She was standing by the window, checking her reflection in the glass, looking bored. She didn't look like she had shed a tear in years. I am fine, Kyle, I said coldly. State your business. Kyle sighed, shaking his head as if dealing with a stubborn child. See, that is what I'm talking about. The aggression, the coldness. I did some reading, Maya. Post-operative depression is a real thing. The anesthesia, the trauma, it messes with your hormones. You are not thinking clearly. You are lashing out at the people who love you most because you are mentally unstable right now. I stared at him. You think I cut you off because I am hormonal? I think you are confused, Kyle said, reaching out to pat my hand. I pulled it away sharply. You are confused and you are hurting. You cut off the money to get a reaction, to feel powerful because you feel helpless in your body. We get it. We forgive you. But now it is time to stop the tantrum. You are hurting Bianca. You are hurting your parents. This is not you, Maya. The real Maya is generous. The real Maya supports family. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. He was twisting my reality, trying to make me question my own sanity so I would open the wallet again. My mother walked back in, holding a block of cheddar cheese she had found, taking bites of it without a cracker. She sat on the arm of my father's chair. Kyle is right, she said, chewing loudly. You are hysterical. You need to snap out of it. We have been very patient with your little mood swings, but we have business to discuss. Business, I repeated. My father sat up, clearing his throat. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed on top of the menu Mrs. Higgins and I had been working on. Kyle has a new opportunity, my father said, his voice booming with authority. A guaranteed return. It is a logistics platform based on cryptocurrency. It is going to revolutionize the shipping industry. He just needs a bridge loan to secure his equity stake. I looked at the paper. It wasn't a business plan. It was a loan guarantee form from a predatory lender. The amount was $50,000. I am not asking for cash, Kyle said quickly, sensing my eyes on the number. I just need a guarantor. Someone with a high credit score and assets. Once the funding round closes in 3 months, I will refinance and your name comes off. You won't pay a dime. It is just a signature, Maya. That is it. A signature to help your family build generational wealth. I looked at them. I looked at my father, who had failed at every business he ever started. I looked at my mother, eating my cheese with entitlement. I looked at Bianca, who was now scrolling on her phone, waiting for her husband to secure her next shopping spree. And I looked at Kyle, the parasite, who thought he could psychoanalyze me into submission. No, I said. The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed. Excuse me? My father asked, his brow furrowing. No, I said again, louder this time. I am not signing it. I am not giving you $50,000. I am not giving you 50 cents. And Kyle, I am not depressed. I have never been more clear-headed in my life. Kyle's face hardened. The mask of concern slipped, revealing the sneer underneath. Do not be a bitch, Maya. It is just a signature. My father stood up. His face turned a dark shade of red. He towered over me, using his physical size to intimidate, a tactic he had used since I was a teenager. Sign the paper, Maya. Stop playing games. Kyle needs this. Bianca needs this. I stood up too. My incision pulled sharply, sending a bolt of pain through my side, but I didn't flinch. I looked him in the eye. I said no. Get out of my house. You ungrateful little, my father roared. He moved faster than I expected. He swung his hand. The slap connected with my cheek with a sharp crack that echoed in the silent room. My head snapped to the side. The taste of copper filled my mouth. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I froze. The room seemed to stop. Bianca gasped. Kyle took a step back. My mother stopped chewing. Even my father looked shocked at what he had done, his hand hovering in the air, trembling slightly. I slowly turned my head back to face him. My cheek burned like fire, but my eyes were ice. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, I whispered. Mrs. Higgins was there in an instant. She didn't shout. She didn't panic. She simply stepped forward, holding her phone up. The screen was recording. I have that on video, she said, her voice steady as a rock. Assault, domestic violence, and I have already pressed the panic button for the private security firm. The police are on their way too. My father's face went pale. You wouldn't, he stammered, looking at me. Maya, I didn't mean to. You provoked me. You were being disrespectful. Get out, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. Get out before I have you arrested right here in front of your neighbors. Mom rushed forward, grabbing Dad's arm. Vernon, let's go. She is crazy. She will do it. Kyle was already backing towards the door, dragging Bianca with him. They were cowards. They liked to bite, but they couldn't handle the fight. My father looked at me one last time. There was no apology in his eyes, only hatred. You are dead to me, he spat. Do not expect us at your funeral. I watched them scramble out the door, tripping over each other in their haste to escape the consequences. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind them, sealing the silence back inside. Mrs. Higgins lowered her phone. She looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. She reached out and gently touched my cheek, where the skin was already starting to swell. Are you okay, child? She asked softly. I touched my face. It hurt. It hurt like hell. But inside, the last thread of guilt had finally snapped. The slap had severed the final connection. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their enemy. I am fine, Mrs. Higgins, I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. I am finally free. Call the gate security. Tell them nobody with the last name Brooks is allowed in. And then call my grandfather. Tell him the party is still on. In fact, tell him to invite more people. I want everyone to see what happens next. War had been declared, and I had the nukes. The invitations arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a private courier service that required a signature. My grandfather Otis had spared no expense. They were printed on heavy cream-colored cardstock, with gold leaf lettering that caught the light. The wording was simple but calculated to trigger the exact dopamine response he wanted. You are cordially invited to the 83rd birthday celebration of Otis Brooks. A special announcement regarding the future of the Brooks estate and trust will be made. Attendance is mandatory for all potential beneficiaries. It was the bait in the trap, and my family swallowed it whole. Less than an hour after the courier trucks left their respective driveways, my phone began to light up. I had unblocked them earlier that morning per Grandpa's instructions, and the flood of notifications was almost comical in its predictability. The people who had screamed at me, slapped me, and abandoned me were suddenly vying for the title of Relative of the Year. My mother was the first to text. There was no mention of the scene in my living room, no apology for the slap. Just a string of heart emojis and a message that read, Maya, honey, I received the invite. So excited to celebrate Grandpa at your beautiful home. Let's put the silliness behind us. Families fight, but we always love each other. I am bringing your favorite potato salad. Then came my father. His text was shorter, trying to regain some dignity, while clearly salivating over the prospect of an inheritance. Maya received the invite. Glad the old man is finally doing the right thing and distributing the assets while he is still alive. We need to present a united front. See you Sunday. Bianca and Kyle were the most transparent. Bianca sent a photo of herself holding the invitation with a caption that said, "Can't wait to see my big sis, I miss you." Kyle sent a separate message acting as if he hadn't tried to gaslight me into a $50,000 loan just days prior. "Hey Maya, hope you are feeling better. Really looking forward to the party. I have some great investment ideas for Grandpa if he decides to liquidate." I sat at my kitchen island reading these messages aloud to Mrs. Higgins. We didn't respond to any of them. We just let the silence sit there, making them sweat, making them wonder if they were truly forgiven or if they were just walking into a minefield. To them, the silence probably looked like submission. They assumed I had calmed down, that I had accepted my role as the doormat again, because the allure of the family inheritance was too strong. They projected their own greed onto me. But while they were busy picking out outfits to impress a man they thought was dying, I was busy turning my home into a surveillance state. I had hired a private security firm recommended by one of my corporate clients. The team leader, a man named Mr. Thorne, who had shoulders the size of a doorframe, arrived on Friday to do a walkthrough. "We need 5 operatives," I told him as we walked through the dining room. "I want them dressed as catering staff. Black slacks, white crisp shirts, bow ties. But I do not want them pouring drinks. I want them watching." Mr. Thorne nodded, taking notes on a tablet. "What are the rules of engagement, Ms. Brooks?" "If anyone raises a voice, you step in," I said. "If anyone raises a hand, you remove them, and under no circumstances is anyone allowed to go upstairs to the bedrooms. The second floor is lockdown territory." "Understood," he said. And the recording devices, I pointed to the elaborate floral arrangements Mrs. Higgins had placed on the dining table and the mantelpiece. Hidden inside the hydrangeas were high-definition microphones. In the corners of the room, disguised as smoke detectors and motion sensors, were wide-angle cameras. "I want everything recorded," I said, my voice flat. "Every conversation, every whisper, every toast. If they say it, I want to be able to prove it in court." Mr. Thorne looked at me with a professional appraisal. He didn't ask why a daughter would need to wiretap her own parents. He just nodded. "We will have the feed running to a secure server. You will have a live view on your tablet." By Saturday night, the house was ready. The caterers were prepping in the kitchen, instructed to ignore any requests from my family and only take orders from Mrs. Higgins. The security team had done their rehearsal. Grandpa Otis had called me from the retirement home, sounding more energized than he had in a decade. "I have my suit pressed, Maya," he had said. "And I have the folder. Just make sure the champagne is cold. Revenge is a dish best served with bubbles." Now it was Sunday morning, the day of the party. The house was quiet in that heavy, pregnant way that comes before a storm. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom, dressed in a sharp navy blue dress that meant business. It wasn't soft. It wasn't flowy. It was structured armor-like. I ran my hand over my side, feeling the ridge of the scar through the fabric. The incision had healed into a jagged pink line. The physical pain was gone, replaced by a dull ache when it rained, but the memory of the pain was vivid. I remembered the cold floor of my office. I remembered the dial tone. I remembered the feeling of being discarded. I looked at my face in the mirror. The bruising on my cheek from my father's slap had faded to a faint yellow shadow, that makeup easily covered, but I didn't want to forget it. I wanted to remember exactly what it felt like to be struck by the man who was supposed to protect me. I wasn't nervous. That was the strange part. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a cold, metallic calm settling in my chest. The Maya who used to beg for approval, the Maya who wrote checks to buy love, she didn't live here anymore. The woman in the mirror was a stranger to my family. And that was my greatest advantage. Mrs. Higgins knocked softly on the door. Ms. Maya. They are pulling into the driveway. I took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of my dress. I picked up the tablet that controlled the cameras. I saw my father's Lexus parking crookedly on the lawn, avoiding the driveway. I saw my mother stepping out, checking her makeup in the side mirror. I saw Bianca and Kyle looking at the house with hungry, calculating eyes. Let them in, Mrs. Higgins, I said into the intercom. Let the show begin. Precision is a sign of respect, which is why my family arrived exactly 45 minutes late. I stood in the foyer with my grandfather, checking my watch as the sound of a car engine revving too loudly announced their presence. They did not walk up the driveway. They made an entrance. My father Vernon stepped out first, adjusting the lapels of a suit that was a shade too bright to be elegant. My mother, Patricia, followed him, draped in a fur stole, despite the mild Atlanta weather, looking like she was arriving at a red carpet event rather than a family birthday dinner. But it was Bianca who truly sucked the air out of the room. She walked through the front door, phone first, a portable ring light clipped to the top of her device, already broadcasting to her followers. Hey guys, welcome to the Brooks family estate, she chirped at her screen, pirouetting in the hallway. We are celebrating Grandpa nearly kicking the bucket today, so send those likes and prayers. My son Leo, excited to see his aunt, ran forward with a handmade card. Auntie B, look what I made. Bianca did not lower the phone. She did not smile. Without even looking down, she physically stiff-armed my 5-year-old son, pushing him out of the frame with her free hand. Watch the lighting, kid, she hissed, her voice dropping an octave from her influencer persona. You are blocking the aesthetic. Go find a toy or something. I stepped forward, my blood boiling, but before I could say a word, Mrs. Higgins had already swooped in, scooping Leo up and whispering something in his ear that made him giggle. She carried him and Luna away from the toxicity, casting a look of pure disdain over her shoulder. Then there was Kyle. My brother-in-law walked straight past me without a hello, heading directly for my grandfather, who was seated in his wheelchair by the fireplace. Kyle was wearing sunglasses indoors. He clapped a hand on my grandfather's frail shoulder, shaking him slightly. What is up, big homie? Kyle said, loud enough for the hidden microphones to pick up every syllable. Happy birthday, bro. You looking good. You looking liquid. Grandpa Otis blinked slowly, gripping his cane. Bro, yeah man. Kyle continued, oblivious to the danger he was in. Listen, I know you are sitting on a pile of cash from the old days, but fiat currency is dead, bro. You need to diversify. I have this new coin launching next week. It is going to the moon. Let me manage your portfolio for you. I will turn that construction money into real wealth. I watched Grandpa's knuckles turn white on his cane. He looked like he wanted to strike Kyle right there and then, but he caught my eye. He gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. Wait, his eyes said. Let them dig the hole deeper. Meanwhile, my parents were treating my home like a hotel they had hostilely taken over. My father was in the dining room, rearranging the place cards I had set out. He moved his seat to the head of the table, the spot reserved for Grandpa. My mother was terrorizing the catering staff. She snapped her fingers at a young waiter, pointing at her empty glass. Boy, get over here, she commanded. This champagne is lukewarm. Who hired you? I want a fresh bottle, and make sure it is actually chilled this time, and bring me some hors d'oeuvres. I am starving because traffic was a nightmare. Mrs. Higgins stepped forward with a bottle of sparkling water. The champagne is chilling, Mrs. Brooks. Perhaps some water while you wait. My mother looked at Mrs. Higgins as if she were a stain on the carpet. She slapped the water bottle out of Mrs. Higgins' hand. It clattered loudly onto the floor, water splashing onto my mother's shoes. I did not ask for water, help, she sneered. I asked for wine. And do not look me in the eye when you speak to me. You are here to serve, not to socialize. Chop chop! The room went silent. The catering staff froze. I took a step forward, ready to throw them out right then and there. Nobody treated Mrs. Higgins like that. Nobody. But then I felt a hand on my arm. It was Grandpa Otis. He had wheeled himself over to me. Not yet, Maya, he whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. Let the camera see it all. Let the jury see who they really are. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stand down. I looked at the hidden camera lens nestled in the floral arrangement on the mantelpiece. The red light was not visible, but I knew it was recording. Every insult, every shove, every moment of unearned arrogance. Finally, we sat down for dinner. My father sat at the head of the table, ignoring the fact that it was Grandpa's birthday. He poured himself a glass of the vintage wine I had bought for Grandpa, stood up, and tapped his fork against the crystal. Attention, everyone, Vernon boomed, puffing out his chest. Bianca finally put her phone down, though she kept it propped up against a centerpiece to keep recording. Kyle leaned back, picking his teeth. I want to propose a toast, my father said, raising his glass high. To my father Otis, the man who started it all. We are gathered here today to honor his legacy, a legacy that I have worked hard to maintain, a legacy that will soon pass into my capable hands to ensure that my children Bianca and Maya and my grandchildren can live the life of luxury they deserve. He looked around the room, his eyes glossing over me and fixing on the expensive art on the walls. Thank you, Dad, for building the foundation. He continued, his voice dripping with false humility. But rest assured, I am ready to take the reins. I know you have been tired lately. I know you are ready to let go. So here is to the future of the Brooks Empire under new management. Cheers. He downed the wine. My mother clapped enthusiastically. Bianca wooed. Kyle raised a fist. Grandpa Otis did not drink. He sat there small and silent in his wheelchair, staring at his son with an expression that was unreadable to them, but crystal clear to me. It was the look of a demolition expert watching a building collapse exactly the way he planned. Thank you, Vernon Grandpa, said, his voice surprisingly strong in the sudden silence. That was a very illuminating speech. It is good to know exactly what you are waiting for. My father sat down looking smug. He thought he had won. He thought the silence was submission. He had no idea that the man sitting across from him was about to light a match that would burn his entire world to the ground. The crystal glass rang out with a sharp, piercing sound as my grandfather tapped his heavy walnut cane against the side of his water goblet. The noise cut through the applause for my father's premature victory speech like a knife. The room fell silent instantly. My father Vernon froze with his wine glass halfway to his mouth. My mother stopped clapping. Bianca lowered her phone. All eyes turned to the head of the table, where Otis Brooks sat, small in stature, but radiating an energy that suddenly made the room feel very cold. That was a lovely speech, Vernon Grandpa said, his voice dry as parchment. You talk a lot about legacy. You talk a lot about the future. But before we get to the reading of my will, and before I sign over the keys to the kingdom, I want to clear up a few things about the present. He looked around the table, his gaze lingering on each family member. I have been stuck in that retirement home for a long time. Sometimes I lose track of what my beloved family is up to. So humor an old man. Tell me, what have you all been doing for the last 2 weeks while my granddaughter Maya was in the hospital? My mother Patricia was the first to answer. She put on her best martyr face, placing a hand over her heart. Oh, Papa, it has been a nightmare. Just terrible. I have been running this house ragged, making sure everything is perfect for your birthday, and worrying about Maya, of course. I have been so sick with worry I haven't slept in days. I was practically beside myself when I heard she needed surgery. Grandpa nodded slowly. I see. Sick with worry. And you, Bianca? How is that master's degree coming along? Bianca sat up straighter, flipping her hair. It is brutal, Grandpa. Seriously, I am pulling all-nighters. My thesis advisor is a tyrant. I have been living in the university library for the last 10 days. I barely have time to eat. That is why I need the tuition support, to focus on my studies. Grandpa hummed. The library, very noble. And you, Kyle, how is the business world treating you? Kyle leaned back, flashing a confident grin. Crushing it, bro. We are in the middle of Series A funding. Investors are sharks, you know. I have been in meetings non-stop. The valuation is looking crazy. We are talking unicorn status in 6 months. Just need a little bridge capital to close the round. Grandpa Otis smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It didn't reach his eyes. It is amazing, he said softly. It is truly amazing how talented this family is. He reached down into the side bag attached to his wheelchair. The sound of a zipper opening echoed in the quiet room. You are so talented, he continued, his voice rising in volume, that you can be in two places at once. He pulled out a thick stack of glossy photographs and slammed them onto the white tablecloth. Patricia, he barked, pointing a gnarled finger at my mother. You were sick with worry. Is that why you were posting selfies from the VIP box at the Eras Tour while your daughter was being cut open? He slid a photo across the table. It showed my mother screaming with joy, holding a $20 cocktail with the timestamp clearly visible. That was... We had tickets from months ago. My mother stammered, her face turning pale. And you? Bianca, Grandpa interrupted, sliding another photo across the mahogany surface. The library must have changed its dress code. Since when do they serve tequila shots at the university archives? This is you 3 days ago at the Golden Roof Bar. Tagged by your friends. #wasted. #tuition money. Bianca gasped, reaching for the photo, but Grandpa swatted her hand away with his cane. And the businessman, Grandpa sneered, turning his gaze to Kyle. Series A funding. Is that what we are calling online sports betting now? He threw a stack of printed bank statements at Kyle. They fluttered down like confetti. FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM. You have lost $12,000 in 2 weeks, son. The only unicorn here is your imagination. The room was deathly silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My family sat there, stripped naked of their lies, staring at the evidence of their own selfishness. Sweat began to bead on my father's forehead. My mother gripped her napkin until her knuckles turned white. But here is the tragic part, I thought as I watched them squirm. They still didn't get it. They looked embarrassed, yes. They looked caught. But they still thought this was just a grumpy old man venting his spleen before giving them what they wanted. They thought they could weather the storm, apologize, and still walk away with the check. They had no idea that the storm hadn't even started yet. Grandpa was just clearing the debris before he dropped the bomb. Well, Grandpa said, leaning back in his chair and adjusting his tie. Now that we have established who you really are, let's talk about who really owns what. He signaled to the lawyer standing in the shadows. The man stepped forward, placing a leather briefcase on the table. The sound of the latches clicking open was like the cocking of a gun. The atmosphere in the dining room had shifted from uncomfortable to suffocating. My family sat in the wreckage of their small lies, the photos of their debauchery still scattered across the white tablecloth like evidence at a crime scene. But Grandpa Otis was not finished. He was just clearing the brush to get to the root of the rot. He slowly turned his wheelchair to face my father directly. Vernon sat frozen, his face a mask of sweating wax, unable to look away from the man he had underestimated for so long. Otis cleared his throat, a sound that echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. Vernon, he began, his voice deceptively soft. We have established that you enjoy the finer things in life. The country club memberships, the vintage wines, the luxury cars, and of course this beautiful home in the suburbs. It is quite a property. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a manicured garden. It must cost a fortune to maintain. My father swallowed hard, adjusting his tie as he tried to regain a shred of his composure. He saw a lifeline. He thought his father was pivoting back to pride, back to the narrative of the self-made man. Yes, Dad, Vernon said, his voice gaining a little strength. It is a lot of work, but I believe in providing the best for my family. I bought this house 5 years ago because I wanted Patricia to have the garden she always dreamed of. It was a stretch, but my investments paid off. I have carried the mortgage on my back without complaining once. It is my castle. Grandpa Otis nodded slowly, tapping his fingers against the armrest of his chair. Your castle. You bought it. You pay the mortgage. That is the story you have been telling the neighbors, isn't it? That is the story you told the country club. That is the story you told me every time I asked why you couldn't visit me more often. Absolutely. Vernon lied, the arrogance creeping back into his tone. I worked double shifts. I made sacrifices. That is what a patriarch does. Otis let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a dry, humorless sound. A patriarch. Vernon, you wouldn't know what a patriarch was if it hit you in the face with a brick. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Mr. Henderson, the family lawyer, who had been standing silently in the corner like a shadow, stepped forward. At the same time, I stood up. I didn't say a word. I simply picked up the remote control for the 70-inch flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, casting a blue glow over the terrified faces of my parents. I connected my tablet to the display. The image that appeared on the screen was crisp and high definition. It was a legal document, a property deed to be exact. Grandpa Otis pointed his cane at the screen. "Read it, Vernon. Read the name on the title." My father squinted. He leaned forward. I saw the blood drain from his face in real time, leaving him gray and ashen. The deed was dated 5 years ago. It detailed the transfer of the property at 42 Oakwood Drive. But in the line designated for the owner, it did not say Vernon Brooks. In bold, unmistakable capital letters it read Maya Brooks. Maya. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That is impossible," she whispered. "That is a mistake. Vernon told me he handled the closing. He told me the bank required his name on the deed." I swiped the screen on my tablet. The image changed. Now it was a spreadsheet, a complex, detailed ledger of every financial transaction regarding the house for the last 60 months. Grandpa's voice rose, filling the room with thunder. "There is no mistake, Patricia. Your husband was bankrupt 5 years ago. He gambled away his retirement. He was days away from foreclosure and eviction. He came crying to Maya. He begged her to save his reputation. And what did my granddaughter do? She bought the house. She paid off his debts. She let you stay here rent-free. She let you pretend you were the owners so you wouldn't be embarrassed at your bridge club." I swiped again. Bank statements appeared. Highlighted in yellow were the monthly transfers from my account to theirs, $4,000. Every single month, for 5 years. "Look at it," Otis roared. "Look at the money. That is not investment income, Vernon. That is your daughter's salary. That is the money she earned working 16-hour days while you played golf." My father shrank into his chair. He looked like a deflated balloon. He tried to speak, but no words came out, just a pathetic sputtering sound. "And this brings us to the tragedy of 2 weeks ago," Grandpa continued, his voice shaking with a righteous fury that made even the security guards straighten up. "You live in her house. You sleep under the roof she pays for. You eat the food she buys. You wear the clothes she subsidizes. And when she called you from an ambulance, when she told you her organs were rupturing, when she begged you to watch her children so she wouldn't die, what did you say?" The room was so quiet I could hear my own heart beating. Grandpa leaned forward, his eyes burning into my parents' souls. "You called her a nuisance," he whispered, the word hanging in the air like poison. "You called her a burden. You told her she was ruining your vibe. A burden. The woman who has been carrying you on her back for half a decade is a burden." He slammed his hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. "You chose a pop star over the woman who owns the chair you are sitting in. You chose a concert over the person who keeps the lights on. You are not parents. You are parasites. And you are the worst kind of parasites, because you convinced yourselves you were the hosts." My mother began to weep. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was the ugly, jagged sobbing of a woman realizing her entire world was built on sand. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Maya, stop him. Please. We didn't know. We didn't mean it." I didn't look at her. I looked at the screen where the numbers proved my worth and their worthlessness. Then I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. It was Kyle, my brother-in-law. The man who had just bragged about his business acumen was slowly pushing his chair back. He looked at the deed on the screen. He looked at the bank statements that showed the money flow had stopped. He looked at Bianca, who was staring at her phone in horror as the comments on her live stream began to ask if her family was broke. Kyle realized the gravy train hadn't just derailed, it had exploded. He stood up, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He took a step away from the table, then another step. He put distance between himself and Bianca, physically separating himself from the sinking ship. "Where are you going?" Bianca whispered, her voice trembling. "Kyle." Kyle didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. He looked at me, fear and calculation warring in his eyes. He realized he had bet on the wrong horse, and in the brutal economy of our family, that meant he was already looking for the exit. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and deadly. The truth was out, and it was uglier than anyone could have imagined. The room was spinning for them, but for me the world had never been steadier. My brother-in-law Kyle had already retreated to the far wall, distancing himself from the blast zone, but there was nowhere left for my parents or Bianca to hide. The image of the property deed on the television screen burned like a neon sign, illuminating 5 years of deception. My father Vernon was slumped in his chair, his face a mask of gray ash. My mother was weeping into her napkin, her tears ruining the silk of her dress. Bianca stared at me with wide, terrified eyes, her phone lying forgotten on the table. The live stream finally ended. Grandpa Otis cleared his throat again. It was the sound of a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence. "Vernon, you spent the last hour talking about my legacy," Otis said, his voice slicing through the whimpering sounds coming from my mother. "You spoke about carrying the torch. You spoke about the burden of leadership. Well, I have decided to relieve you of that burden permanently." He gestured to Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, who opened the briefcase and produced 3 crisp white envelopes and 1 thick leather-bound folder. "This morning before coming here, I executed a new last will and testament," Grandpa announced. "The previous draft, the one that left my construction company, my investment portfolio, and my liquid assets to you, Vernon, has been shredded. It no longer exists." My father made a choking sound, reaching out a trembling hand, as if he could physically stop the words from hanging in the air. "Dad, please," he rasped. "You cannot do this. I am your son. You are my biological son." "Yes," Otis agreed coldly. "But you are not my heir. An heir builds. An heir protects. You destroy. You consume. And I will not let you consume what took me 40 years to build." Grandpa placed his hand on the leather folder. "The entirety of my estate, valued at approximately $2 million after taxes, has been placed into an irrevocable trust," he declared. "The sole beneficiaries of this trust are my great-grandchildren Leo and Luna Brooks." He looked at me, his eyes softening just a fraction. "And the sole trustee with full power of attorney and absolute discretion over every penny until the twins turn 25 is Maya." Bianca shrieked. It was a sharp, piercing sound of pure entitlement being crushed. "What? That is not fair. She is already rich. She has the house. Why does she get everything?" Otis turned his gaze to her. It was a look of pure disgust. "You do not get nothing, Bianca," he said calmly. "I have not forgotten you. Or your parents. Mr. Henderson, please distribute the bequests." The lawyer stepped forward and handed one of the white envelopes to Vernon, one to Patricia, and one to Bianca. They grabbed them desperately, tearing them open with shaking fingers, hoping for a reprieve, hoping for a check that would salvage their lifestyles. They pulled out the contents. Inside each envelope was a single crisp $1 bill. My mother stared at the dollar bill in her hand, her lip quivering. $1. "Is this a joke?" "It is a legal strategy," Patricia Otis explained, his voice devoid of pity. "If I left you nothing, you could sue the estate claiming I forgot you, or that I was senile. By leaving you $1, I am acknowledging that you exist and that I have consciously decided you deserve absolutely nothing more. It is bulletproof. You cannot contest it. You cannot fight it. You are disinherited. My father crushed the dollar bill in his fist, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. I will sue you, he roared, standing up and knocking his chair over. I will drag you to court. I will prove you were coerced. Maya manipulated you. Sit down, Vernon, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. I simply spoke with the authority of the person holding all the cards. I reached under the table and pulled out a large manila envelope of my own. You can try to sue. I continued, standing up to meet his gaze. You can spend the last of your dwindling savings on lawyers who will tell you exactly what Grandpa just told you. But while you are doing that, you are going to need to find somewhere to sleep. I slid the envelope across the table. It stopped right in front of his clenched fist. What is this? He spat. That is a formal notice to quit, I said, otherwise known as an eviction notice. My mother wailed. Maya. No. You cannot kick us out. This is our home. It is my house, I corrected her. And according to the laws of this state, since you do not have a lease and you do not pay rent, you are technically guests who have overstayed their welcome. However, I am not a monster. I am giving you the legally required 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days, my father gasped. But where will we go? We have no credit. We have no cash flow. That sounds like a personal problem, I said, crossing my arms. But since I am a businesswoman, I am willing to offer you an alternative. I pulled out a second document. A stapled contract. This is a standard residential lease agreement, I said. If you wish to stay in this house, you can sign this. The rent will be $4,500 a month, which is the fair market value for a property of this size in this neighborhood. I require the first month, last month, and a security deposit up front. That is $13,500 due by tomorrow morning. $13,000, my mother screamed. We don't have that kind of money. You know we don't. Then you better start packing, I said. Bianca stood up, her face streaked with mascara tears. You are evil. Maya, you are actually evil. How are we supposed to live? I have school. I have my thesis. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that silenced her immediately. Drop the act, Bianca, I said. I called the university registrar this morning. I spoke to the dean of students. Bianca went pale. What I asked them why my tuition payments were being returned? I lied smoothly. And they told me the truth. You haven't been enrolled for 3 semesters. You were academically dismissed for plagiarism and non-attendance a year and a half ago. The room gasped. My parents looked at Bianca in shock. You told us you were on the dean's list, my father whispered. She was on a list, all right, I said. The blacklist. And since fraud is a crime, and since you used the U.S. postal system to mail me fake report cards to solicit money, I have forwarded all the documentation to the fraud department at my bank. They might be contacting the police. Bianca collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands. And Kyle, I said, turning to my brother-in-law who was inching towards the exit. Don't think you are walking away clean. Kyle froze his hand on the doorknob. I didn't do anything, Maya. This is between you and them. Is it? I asked. Because I also had a lovely chat with my accountant. He was very interested to see the tax returns you and Bianca filed jointly, specifically the part where you failed to declare the 6 figures of gambling winnings and losses you cycled through offshore betting sites. The IRS takes tax evasion very seriously, Kyle. I sent them your username and transaction history anonymously about an hour ago. Kyle looked like he was going to vomit. He didn't say a word. He just ripped the door open and ran out into the night, leaving his wife and her family to burn. The room descended into chaos. My mother was on the floor, clutching the hem of my dress, begging, pleading, promising she would change, promising she would love me if I just gave them another chance. My father was shouting at the walls, cursing his father, cursing me, cursing the world. Bianca was sobbing, rocking back and forth. I looked at Grandpa Otis. He raised his glass of water in a silent toast. "Mr. Thorne," I said to the head of security. The large man stepped forward from the shadows. "Yes, Ms. Brooks, please escort these guests to their cars," I said. "They have a lot of packing to do, and I have a birthday cake to eat with my children." My parents were dragged out, still screaming, their cries echoing down the driveway until the heavy front door slammed shut, silencing them for good. I stood in the quiet foyer, took a deep breath, and felt the weight of 5 years lift off my shoulders. It was done. The illusion of the perfect family did not just crack. It shattered into a million jagged pieces right there on my dining room floor. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and sudden raw panic. My brother-in-law, Kyle, was the first to break the tableau. The man who had spent the last hour calling my grandfather bro and bragging about his non-existent business empire turned on my sister with the ferocity of a cornered animal. The realization that the golden goose was dead and that he was potentially facing a federal investigation for tax fraud stripped away every layer of his charm. He spun around to face Bianca, his face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. "You lied to me!" he screamed, his voice cracking with rage. "You sat there for 3 years and told me you were set for life. You told me the old man was going to cash out and we would be royalty." Bianca reached for him, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "Kyle, please," she sobbed, grasping at the sleeve of his jacket. "We can figure this out. We are a team. I love you." Kyle laughed, and it was a cruel, hollow sound. "You love me. You trapped me, Bianca. I wasted 3 years of my prime on you because I thought you came with a trust fund. What are you now? You are a college dropout with no money, no skills, and a fraud record. You are nothing." He reached for his left hand. With a violent jerk, he tore off his platinum wedding band. He threw it at her. The ring hit her in the chest and bounced onto the hardwood floor with a dull metallic ping that echoed in the silence. "I am done," Kyle spat. "Do not call me. Do not follow me. I am going to call my lawyer and file for an annulment based on fraud." He didn't look back. He stormed out the front door, leaving it wide open. We heard his sports car engine roar to life and tires screeching against the pavement as he sped away, leaving his wife of 3 years broken on the floor. Bianca wailed. It was a high, keening sound of absolute despair. She curled into a ball, rocking back and forth, clutching the spot where the ring had hit her. But I did not have time to pity her, because now the attention shifted to the two people who were responsible for creating this monster. My parents. My father Vernon was leaning against the wall, his hand over his chest, gasping for air, as if he were having a heart attack. But I knew his medical history better than he did. It wasn't a heart attack. It was a panic attack induced by the terrifying prospect of poverty. My mother Patricia, however, went for the only weapon she had left. Emotional manipulation. She threw herself at my feet. Literally. The woman who had slapped Mrs. Higgins' hand an hour ago, the woman who had demanded VIP treatment, dropped to her knees on the Persian rug. She crawled towards me, her hands reaching out to grab the hem of my dress. "Maya, baby, please," she cried, her voice trembling with hysteria. "You cannot do this. You cannot kick us out. We are old people. We have nowhere to go. We have no savings. We spent it all keeping up this house for you." "For me," I asked, taking a deliberate step back so she couldn't touch me. "You spent it on country clubs and designer bags. We made mistakes," she blubbered, tears dripping off her nose. "We were foolish. But we are your parents. I changed your diapers. I sat up with you when you had chicken pox. Doesn't that count for anything? You cannot leave us homeless. We will be the laughing stock of the town." I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had ignored my calls from the ambulance because she didn't want to ruin her vibe at a concert. I looked for a shred of empathy, a spark of love, but all I saw was a desperate woman terrified of losing her social standing. "You are right, Mom," I said, my voice as cold as the grave. "It would be terrible if you were homeless." But lucky for you, there are hotels. Hotels, she gasped, looking up with a glimmer of hope. You will pay for a hotel? I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. No, Mom. You will pay for it. There is a lovely Marriott downtown. I am sure they have a suite available. You can just use that credit card you used to buy the Taylor Swift tickets. You know the one you said had a limitless limit? Her face crumbled as the realization hit her. Oh, wait, I continued, feigning surprise. I forgot. I reported that card stolen this morning, and since the bank knows about the unauthorized transactions, I assume it is currently frozen. And your personal cards? Well, considering Dad's credit score is lower than his golf handicap, I doubt they will work either. Maya, she screamed, lunging for my ankle. You are a monster. That was the signal. I looked at Mr. Thorne, the head of the security team, who had been standing silently by the door. Mr. Thorne, I said calmly, I believe these guests are now trespassing. Please remove them from the property. And if they resist, feel free to call the local police. I am sure the neighbors would love to see a squad car in the driveway. Mr. Thorne moved with the efficiency of a machine. He signaled his team. Two large men in catering uniforms stepped forward. They didn't drag my parents, but they were firm. They lifted my mother to her feet by her elbows. Another guard took my father by the arm. Get your hands off me, Vernon shouted, finding his voice at last. I am Vernon Brooks. I own this house, sir. You have 30 days to vacate, the guard said professionally. But for tonight, you need to leave, now. They escorted them towards the door. Bianca, still sobbing on the floor, was helped up by the third guard. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen, makeup smeared across her face like a tragic clown. Maya, she whispered, I have no money. Kyle took the car keys. How am I supposed to leave? I picked up her purse from the table and handed it to her. Uber is an app. Bianca, I said, I am sure you know how to use it. You used it enough on my dime. I watched them go. I watched my mother kicking and screaming as she was led out. I watched my father shouting threats that had no teeth. I watched Bianca stumble out into the darkness alone and broken. Mr. Thorne followed them out. I heard the heavy front door close with a solid, definitive thud. Then I heard the click of the deadbolt sliding into place. Silence. Beautiful, absolute silence rushed back into the room. The tension that had gripped the house for 5 years evaporated instantly. The energy of entitlement, of greed, of toxicity was gone. I turned to look at the head of the table. Grandpa Otis was still sitting there. He hadn't moved a muscle during the entire eviction. Now he slowly picked up his glass of water. He looked at me, and a genuine smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. Well, he said, his voice calm and steady. That went better than I expected. I thought Vernon would try to throw a punch. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My knees suddenly felt weak, and I sank into the chair next to him. I reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm and rough, a grounding force in the aftermath of the storm. Are you okay? I asked him. I am fantastic. He chuckled. I haven't had this much fun since I poured the concrete for the city stadium in '72. But more importantly, Maya, are you okay? I looked around the empty room. I looked at the security monitors on my tablet showing the taillights of my parents' taxi disappearing down the street. I thought about the empty bedrooms upstairs that would no longer house people who hated me. I thought about my bank account, which was now solely under my control. I thought about Leo and Luna sleeping peacefully upstairs, their futures secured by the trust fund. I touched the scar on my side. It didn't hurt anymore. I am okay, Grandpa, I said, and tears of relief finally spilled over. I am really okay. Just then the kitchen door swung open. Mrs. Higgins walked in holding a large chocolate cake with lit candles. She had Leo and Luna trailing behind her in their pajamas, rubbing sleep from their eyes but looking excited for cake. "Did the bad people leave, Mommy?" Leo asked, climbing onto my lap. "Yes, baby," I said, kissing the top of his head. "They left. It is just us now." Luna looked at Grandpa Otis. "Happy birthday!" Great-Grandpa Otis beamed the light from the candles reflecting in his eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart." Mrs. Higgins set the cake down in front of him. "Make a wish, Mr. Brooks." Grandpa looked at me. He looked at the twins. He looked at the empty seats where his son and daughter-in-law had sat just minutes ago. "I don't need to wish for anything," he said softly. "I got exactly what I wanted. My family is safe." He blew out the candles. The smoke curled up into the air, carrying away the last remnants of the past. We ate cake in the quiet house, laughing at silly jokes free from the weight of obligation. Outside, the world was dark, but inside the light was warm, and for the first time in my life I knew exactly who belonged at my table. 365 days. That is exactly how long it has been since I changed the locks on my front door and locked my toxicity out of my life. They say time heals all wounds, but I have discovered that time is also a magnificent architect of karma. It builds consequences brick by brick, and watching the structure of my family's arrogance collapse has been the most educational experience of my life. My father Vernon used to complain if his steak was cooked medium well instead of medium rare. Today he does not have that luxury. He and my mother live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment complex next to the interstate highway. The walls are thin and the neighbors are loud. At 60 years old, instead of retiring to the golf course, my father puts on a red vest every morning and stands for 8 hours at the local discount supermarket. He scans coupons, he bags groceries, and occasionally, he has to carry bags to the cars of the very men he used to try to impress at the country club. I heard from a friend that he keeps his head down, terrified they will recognize him, but they never do. To them, he is just another invisible old man working for minimum wage. My mother Patricia works the early shift at a bakery, not a high-end patisserie, but the kind inside a gas station convenience store. Her manicured nails are gone, replaced by short, practical ones that are constantly stained with grease. She spends her breaks sitting on a milk crate in the alley, smoking cheap cigarettes, and telling anyone who will listen about how ungrateful her daughter is. But nobody listens. They just see a bitter woman who grew old without growing up. And then there is Bianca. The golden child, the influencer, the girl who thought the world owed her a living. She is currently working double shifts at a diner on the outskirts of the city. Her hands, which used to hold nothing heavier than a champagne flute, are now burned from hot plates and chapped from sanitizer. She looks 10 years older. The spark in her eyes is gone, extinguished by the brutal reality of paying her own rent. As for her husband Kyle, he landed on his feet as cockroaches often do. He finalized their divorce 2 months ago and was seen last week in Miami, hanging onto the arm of a wealthy 65-year-old widow who just sold a real estate empire. He is running the same con, just with a different victim. I almost pity her, but then I remember how he threw his wedding ring at my sister, and I realize that predators eventually eat themselves. As for me, the view is a little different. I am currently standing on the deck of a 60-foot catamaran, feeling the warm breeze of the Caribbean Sea on my face. The water is a shade of turquoise that looks like it was painted by a dream. Behind me, I can hear the sound of laughter. Leo and Luna are chasing each other around the deck, their faces smeared with icing from their 6th birthday cake. They are happy. They are safe. They do not know the word burden. They only know the word love. Sitting in the captain's chair, wearing a hat that is 2 sizes too big for him, is Grandpa Otis. At 83, he looks younger than he did a year ago. Spite, it turns out, is a wonderful preservative. He is laughing as he watches the twins, a glass of iced tea in his hand, looking like a man who has won the lottery. And in a way he did. We all did. I was promoted last month. I am no longer the CFO. I am the CEO. The board recognized that if I could clean up the mess of my personal life with such ruthless efficiency, I could certainly handle the company's restructuring. I doubled our stock price in 2 quarters. I bought a vacation home. I started a scholarship fund for single mothers. I built a life that is entirely authentically mine. My phone buzzed in my hand, breaking my reverie. I looked down. It was a text message from a number I did not save, but I recognized the area code. Maya, please, the message read. It was from my mother. Dad's back is killing him from standing all day. He needs to see a chiropractor, but our insurance doesn't cover it. It is only $500. Please, honey, he is your father. Just this once. I stared at the screen. $500. I used to spend that on a Tuesday dinner for them without blinking. Now it was a fortune to them. A lifeline. I looked at my father's phantom pain in the text message. I felt the ghost of the incision on my own side, the scar from the surgery where they left me to die. I remembered the silence on the other end of the phone when I begged for help. I looked up at the horizon where the blue sky met the blue water. It was vast and clean and endless. I smiled. I did not feel anger. I did not feel guilt. I felt absolutely nothing. I walked over to the railing of the yacht. The metal was cool under my hand. I held the phone out over the churning white wake of the boat. They say blood is thicker than water. That is the lie families tell you to keep you trapped in their toxicity. But standing here surrounded by the family I chose, I know the truth. Sometimes the water is clean and the blood is poison. And the only way to survive is to stop drinking the poison. I opened my hand. The phone tumbled through the air, turning over once, twice, before it hit the water with a satisfying splash. It sank instantly, taking the text message, the guilt and the last link to my past down to the bottom of the ocean. I turned back to my grandfather and my children. "Who wants more cake?" I asked. Grandpa Otis raised his glass. "I do," he shouted. I walked back toward the laughter, leaving the wake behind me to disappear into the sea. The screen fades to black. And then there is only music. The most painful lesson from Maya's journey is that shared blood does not guarantee loyalty. For years, she confused financial support with love, only to realize she was financing her own disrespect. True family isn't defined by a last name, but by who stands beside you when you are most vulnerable. We must learn that setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty. It is an act of survival. You are under no obligation to keep warm those who set you on fire. Sometimes the only way to find your true family is to evict the toxic one. If this story of justice satisfied your soul, please hit that like button and subscribe for more daily drama. Tell me in the comments below, have you ever had to cut off a family member to save your own peace? I read every single story.